Good morning and welcome. My name is Xavier Billingsley. I am the Assistant Cultural Affairs Attaché here in Bogota, Colombia. Thank you so much for joining our Facebook Live session to celebrate Pride Month here in Colombia. Today we have a very special invite, the artist Sasha Velour. But before I start, I want to invite everybody to follow our Facebook and social media pages. I want to introduce Sasha Velour right now. Sasha Velour is a gender-fluid drag queen and theater artist who took home the crown on RuPaul's Drag Race Season 9, where she was an advocate for more inclusive representations within drag, advocate for social advancement amongst vulnerable populations, and one of Drag Race's most unforgettable lip syncs in her history. As an artist, Sasha is also known for the international tour of her acclaimed solo theatrical work, Smoke and Mirrors, which has toured 3 continents. She's also the host of the long-running drag review Nightgowns, which she adapted into a docuseries streaming on the Roku channel. She recently starred in Opera Philadelphia's short art opera film, The Island We Made, and her first book will be published in 2022. Everyone, please welcome Sasha Velour. Sasha, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Xavier. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. As you said, I'm busy doing everything. That reminder made me nervous, but I'm so excited to be talking with all of you today, and thank you for tuning in and taking the time.
No, thank you. The pleasure is all of ours. So just to start off, can you tell us how you're doing and where you are?
Okay, yeah, I am in Brooklyn, New York. I'm in the home that I've been cooped up in for 15 months now, and we are getting ready to head out on the road. 2022 is when I get to be touring and doing drag around the world again, and until then I'll be home throwing drag shows from around the corner.
I love that. So, Sasha, for those who might not be familiar with the art of drag, could you please tell us or give us a quick explanation of what drag is and what it means to you?
Okay, well, first of all, I hope everyone has seen some drag. In fact, I'm sure you've seen a little drag sometime in your lives. Drag is just performance, many different kinds of performance, but the common theme is that it always exaggerates gender, and then usually rejects all the limitations of gender, the idea that there is a gender binary, particularly. And so drag isn't just maybe a limited idea of men dressing as women or women dressing up as men, but there are all kinds of other transformations that maybe shake the idea of women and men being the only gender options, making room for expressions that are more fluid or non-binary or trans as well.
Thank you. That's a really good explanation. And just to go a little farther than that, can you tell us where that intersectionality or where that connection is between drag and what it signifies for the LGBTQIA plus community?
Oh, yeah, that is such a good question. I mean, when I look at the history, I love studying the history of drag around the world, drag and queer expression, because really drag is just the phenomenon of queer people getting together to try to express ourselves, express what's inside through joy and have fun. And that means dressing up, that means rejecting the sometimes violent oppressions of the world around us and forming a safe community where we can dress up and lip sync and give shows. And at various times and in various places, that has real political necessity. It's life-saving to create a community that can see you as you are and can keep you safe. So maybe that answers your question a little.
No, that's perfect, and I really like the point about how it can also translate into political expression, because that is so true and important in the 21st century. We too know that drag has this long story history in the LGBTQ community. But could you tell us about your personal story? How did you get into drag? Did it start as something for fun, or was it automatically an art form? Let's talk about that.
Well, when I was a little kid, I was doing drag. I thought I invented it. I thought I was the only little boy who wanted to dress up like a girl. So I found connection with weird women, with witches and evil queens and butches, and I thought, okay, this is the closest to the thing that I can connect with. And I actually realized that maybe art and theater didn't have a place for those kinds of voices. Because of my love of dressing up, I wanted to be an actor, but I don't want to play male roles. That doesn't speak to me. So it was kind of in finding drag and finding that I was far from the only person in the world to want this, but actually part of a huge community of people everywhere who can understand the appeal of expression and performance freed from the limitations of binary gender, and then perhaps a world, a life that is free from those limitations as well, that's on the other side of the lip sync. And so it became important to me, it became my passion when I realized that it was so political, and particularly reading the accounts of the Stonewall riots in America, which had been much is made about how it's just one of many turning points that was going on, especially throughout the 60s in the civil rights movement. But the Stonewall uprising, like many queer protests, was against police violence and state violence, sanctioned violence against queer people, particularly poor people, particularly trans people, particularly queer people of color. And it was drag queens, and what that meant at the time was not professional entertainers, but queer punks who had created this community in the city, standing up for what's right because they knew what the most vulnerable populations needed, because queer people are made up from all over. So the opportunity of a queer subculture was one that like gets people thinking about what people around you need. And I wanted to be connected to my queer community in that way. And that's really one of the reasons that I became a drag queen. And finding how to combine artistic expression with real political needs is something that I love.
That's great. I love that answer because I do want to talk about Stonewall, obviously, in its place in this month, because oftentimes people don't, in my opinion, give it its due recognition. But before we go there, can we take a few steps years back, and let's talk about Sasha Velour and the House of Velour and this brand that you have created. Can you tell us the story behind the name Sasha Velour?
Okay, well, my name has always been Sasha. It's a Russian family name, and so all my life, Americans asked me, like, why do you have a girl's name? And I explained, it's short for Alexander, it's my nickname, it's a very common Russian name. But I think secretly I have always liked having a girl's name, and so I needed to carry that on. Maybe the ambivalence of it is perfect for my drag. And then I chose a stage name, Velour, and it came from one of my favorite queer movies, a sci-fi, kind of B-movie, sci-fi, San Francisco movie called Vegas in Space. And there's just a random character named Velour, and I love that last name. Velour is a fabric that is cheap and easy to use and comes in all these different colors, and I think it's better than velvet. And I think what's a better metaphor for drag than velour?
No, that's such a great, and also everything makes sense now. Yeah, because and we'll talk about this Russian connection in this next question, but it kind of makes sense now. It all, and that's actually kind of funny. Thank you for sharing that story, Sasha. Moving on to your career and your life and your studies academically, a lot of people don't know this. I don't think here in Colombia, but it's something really cool is that you're a Fulbright alumni, Fulbright Scholar alumni. And we have a host of amazing Fulbright alumni here, both in the artistic realm, but also in the academia realm. So can you talk about your time as a Fulbright a scholar? Where did you study? How did you decide to pursue the Fulbright program?
Oh, I was really thankful for the Fulbright program because it allowed me to go abroad. I wanted to live in Russia for a year as an adult and learn about all the arts, but particularly about the artwork being created by queer political groups. And I found out about the Fulbright program through really great resources at my university. I'm so thankful for it because it connected me with amazing Russian academics, with other American researchers, and then through the project, I'll tell you a little bit about my project. It was about I submitted a project to go to Moscow to look at street art that was for free for people to see. And I was looking at graffiti. I have my graffiti headpiece that I've made. Graffiti, like street posters. And then I kind of looked at museums and art galleries in contrast, because I always feel like there's some interesting tension between art that speaks to what people need to make and the art that's being lifted up as art. And I was particularly interested in asking queer artists, queer people in Russia, why there wasn't more visible artwork coming out of the queer activist movement. And they said, we don't have time to make art. We are fighting to keep our jobs and stay alive. Wow. And yet they were writing poetry and making zines and creating protest posters. And I think it absolutely was art, because everyone needs to make these things, to put our thoughts down, to share them, to connect and organize. But sometimes what's defined as art is too narrow, and artists, significant artists, can't even see themselves, can't recognize themselves in it. So one of my missions is also to kind of expand that idea about what art is, show that anyone can be an artist, and it's just a medium for getting your important messages out into the world with a little joy and a little beauty and some design.
No, I absolutely love that answer, because first, Bogota is considered the mecca for graffiti art in the streets, and there is a lot of conversation, what you just talked about curated art forms that's set up in a modern art museum or in a regular museum here, versus the art that we see in our streets, which we see a lot of it in the Bogota scenario as well. Two very popular cities for street art, which is dynamic, but it's important to also recognize that as an art form and a political expression form as well, because there's so much of it, and a lot of these artists have so much to say and so much to contribute to daily society. So just a plug for anybody who's listening right now, I really want to encourage you all to apply for the Fulbright program or look into it. You might think that it's only academic. Oh, I just have to write papers, or I'm doing academic research, but that is not the case at all. There are Fulbright programs to study PhDs in all types of art forms in Colombia. There are different types to teach English as well, or to teach Spanish, excuse me. So check it out, because you never know if you might qualify or if there might be something for you, and you can find out about that at the U.S. Embassy page. Like Sasha said, this is one of the most coveted programs that the State Department offers, and it has a long story tradition. So check that out if you're listening and you're curious. Sasha, I want to kind of flip the page now and talk about different representations of drag. In your season of Drag Race, you grew prominence in season 9 for being that outspoken advocate for honoring various forms of drag and ensuring that artistry was open to many people who might not just identify as male or gay. Could you please explain the importance of having diverse groups represented within drag?
I mean, I think it's true everywhere, but the diversity in drag is what makes it so great, and so to not have it is not even to really have drag at all, I think. When I started performing in my hometown, in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, I saw drag performances from trans men, trans women, from non-binary or gender fluid people like myself, from lesbians in high femme drag, and that was just what drag was. And in fact, usually the scenes were run by the people who weren't cis men. Those were the folks in the town who knew how to keep things organized and how to get the shows happening. And it's interesting. It's almost like maybe mainstream audiences, like the drag queens who have become pop cultural phenomenon. Usually, it's more of a binary situation. Typically, men dressing in high feminine drag. But I think that the more interesting thing, the more powerful thing in drag is the way that it makes space for non-binary options. So I think if we can really say again and again that is what makes drag valuable, is that it makes serious space and more than just space for us to give our voice, but employment opportunities, a job for queer, for trans, for non-binary people, where it's not a hindrance to us to be queer. It's a celebrated asset.
That's great. Speaking of different representations in drag, I like to talk about those people who might not identify in those traditional gender groups. Shout out to all of our gender fluid and non-binary friends who are watching. What other strategies do you think we could do to support gender non-conforming identity rights and groups in our own communities?
This is a big, important question. I think
the whole session you could use on this question alone.
This is so key. I think we're shifting to understand that the way maybe we grew up understanding gender isn't the only way to understand it, and it's not that scientific or historical either. And I think coming to see that non-binary and trans people exist it's a political project. I think it's a post-colonial project, because I know that non-binary and trans identities existed all over the world before serious spread of Christianity and European colonialism. And I think understanding that is going to be part of accepting that this is not some trend, that we have always existed all over the world, queer and trans people. And then we need to create legal protections and recognition, and education, probably for doctors, administrators, educators. I think what happens in school is so important for young people to understand who they are. So basically everything needs to change, but we're on the way.
Throw it away and let's start over. As you know, drag has been an art form of protest for decades. Could you just give a quick and dirty explanation of the significance of Stonewall, the Stonewall riots, uprisings, in the U.S. and how it kind of, spread, this movement spread? And also, could you explain to the viewers the significance of drag in social movements as well?
Yeah, well, I've been finding about drag rebels going back around the world, even before the 20th century. Like in Wales, there were a bunch of peasants in the 1800s who all called themselves Rebecca, and rose up against tax collectors from the king. And they wore drag as a kind of disguise, but also as a kind of owning of their kind of power to resist. So there's something transgressive about dressing up. In terms of Stonewall, basically, in the States prior to the 70s or 80s, it seems like every space where queer people could gather was targeted by the police. And it was illegal to dress in drag, it was illegal to dance with someone of the same sex, or illegal to serve liquor to people dancing together of the same sex. And so the police would raid bars all over the country, and obviously around the world as well, weekly, all the time. And in 1969, the drag queens in particular, who were being arrested from the Stonewall Inn and loaded into police wagons to be taken to jail, along with some like butch lesbians and drag kings, started resisting against the police and would not go into the wagons. And that started a huge conflict on the street that got the attention of the news media. And it's kind of, I think what we are finding out is that those things happened all over, but what was particularly unique about Stonewall was the way it got recorded. And I think this is such an interesting thing for queer people, is that a lot of times stories about our existence are not shared. We have to find them again, or sometimes extrapolate or use our imagination, because even
No.
learning about Stonewall, it's like fags like uprise against the police is the headlines. They were very skewed against gay rights at the time. And looking back, we understand just how important this moment was.
No, and another part is that they're often whitewashed as well. The people of color, gay people of color are taken out of the narrative when oftentimes they were the center point of the narrative. So yeah, you have to kind of find these stories, and it's interesting because I think millennials and I hate to, I'm a millennial myself, but I do hate to blame like certain age group sometimes, but I think it's important to note that sometimes I feel like we forget that this was not that long ago. This was, our parents were living, obviously a lot of people's grandparents were living as well when these things happened. And so it's so important to kind of preserve and remember and try to spread the knowledge and to spread the importance of how far we've come, but also how much more we still have, and how much as a society beyond the United States, beyond New York, beyond Colombia, as a society, how much we have to lose if we don't continue to advocate, if we don't continue to be aware. No, that's a great wrap up. I really appreciate that, Sasha. To my next question, during the 2020 Black Lives Matter movement, we saw an active participation of the LGBTQ community, specifically Black and queer communities, who were really in the front lines of those movements. I would really appreciate it if you could explain why there seems to be a presence of the LGBTQ community in these monumental movements all the time.
I think about Sylvia Rivera, who is one of my drag heroes, who may or may not have been at Stonewall. She said she was. It doesn't really matter. But she talked about how her whole life she fought for rights, and it didn't matter. Part of being a queer revolutionary isn't just thinking about maybe the issues that affect you immediately, but the issues that affect the people in your community. And she, kind of prior to gay liberation, the queer community was deeply invested in the Black civil rights movement, in the feminist movement, in workers' rights, student uprisings, and I think that we do best when that continues. When queer people are really attuned to social justice, and again, not just thinking about themselves.
That's great. I want to move now to the point of going back to the House of Velour, going back to the art form and talking more about what it represents to work in a culture space, specifically in these times of the pandemic. I know in the United States, it finally seems to be a rainbow on the other side. Things are opening up and things are getting better. But here in Colombia, we still have a way to go. I don't, you probably know, bars and things like that aren't really open right now. They're really limited in capacity, and it's just not happening right now. But I do want to talk about, some of the work that you're doing, and how it kind of relates to the creative world. Could you tell us about your creative process behind your shows, and how do you kind of process things out?
Well, I mean, one thing that you say right off the top, I think it is so interesting how some places in the world are moving towards reopening, and that it clearly is not, it's not the same internationally, and I that is disturbing to me, and I do want to look more as a world community, partly because of this opportunity to speak to you. I've been even more aware than usual of what's going on in Colombia and reading about the protests. I just 2 days ago read about the voguing non-binary protesters in the streets of Bogota. And it was like, those are our people. We really are connected
Yeah.
across oceans, in a fight for progress, and throwing whatever skills we have. If it is the skill to just be vibrant and loud and move our bodies, like we're gonna use that. And so I think when it comes to what I can do with my art, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I feel like we need to return with new ideas based on some of the things that we've been listening to and learning during this time. I think things like this, the ability to connect so easily over the internet, that's going to be a tool going forward to make things more accessible to people. Like I'm always going to do shows now with a virtual component so that people can tune in for lower ticket prices. They can see what's going on in many different places at once. I think in terms of my show Nightgowns that you mentioned earlier, that's always been a platform for inclusive drag where there are no limitations on what people do, but we're even shifting the model there, trying to become more collaborative, being totally transparent about all financials and doing profit share splits between performers. Just there, in every way, it's like in your community right in front of you, there's always things that you can change towards the general missions that you've been listening to. And I'm trying to do that now in my immediate drag world as these opportunities do open back.
No, I think that that's really a good point, Sasha. I'm thinking about that now because like I told you, I'm on vacation. I'm in the U.S. and I was talking to my parents about how things will look post pan when we finally get out of this, and I think more people are going to be hyper aware, more hypersensitive about income and distribution and how we treat people and I really hope that this is the case because it wasn't an issue just not in the US but just in the world about essential workers and pay and access to food and access to basic needs, healthcare. I think that it is a conversation obviously worth and warranted, and I hope that it continues. And I love the point that you mentioned about doing fair share and reviewing things for production and other components who might be involved with the process with you in your work. I really appreciate that. Moving forward, I'd like to discuss some other projects, including fashion, documentary, film, comics, and writing. What led you to explore so many different fields? Because it's a lot.
Necessity. I just have to make some money. No, I'm just kidding. um, I think I'm a storyteller, I guess. I gravitate towards lots of different things at once. When I do stage shows, I'm like also doing a multimedia lecture with my PowerPoint presentations. I use projections and audio and fashion all at the same time in my drag, so it makes sense to pretend to be a professional in those fields as well. I'm trying my hand at it, and thankfully I have lots of support and encouragement.
Great. That's great. Sasha, can you talk about the House of Velour and how this came about and what kind of components? So, because I've talked a little bit about the projects that the House of Velour has coming up with you, but I don't know if there are any other people you want to plug or talk about that are coming up or through the House of Velour.
Yeah. Well, the House of Velour is fundamentally it's me and my partner Johnny and our dog Vanya, and then those are the people who do all of the really boring work. Well, not Vanya. He just rests and gets treats. But
he's actually living the best life. Yeah,
exactly. And me and my partner Johnny have developed a very chaotic and quick moving way to work and get things done. And then we work with this fabulous community of different artists who kind of come in and out of different things. And I think it's good to have those kinds of relationships with creatives where it's like you don't always have to be doing things together, but when you do, you really like support and uplift each other. We're not a cult, you know. And so the fantastic performers who you can find out about by watching Nightgowns on YouTube, for example, like Neon Calypso, who finally has moved to New York, has her own place, and my really close friends, Kay James and Miss Malice, who are a couple who do drag. Kay James is one of the most fabulous drag kings, and people might know some of the amazing designers that I work with as well, like Diego Montoya, who in some ways like taught me how to make we taught each other how to make clothes, trying to come up with looks to please the internet over the past 3 years. And he's of course an amazing designer who's doing great things. So yeah, the House of Velours is like a amorphous community of people who love each other and work way too much.
When we were working on our questions to ask somebody on our team at the embassy, they described House of Velour as a conglomerate. A conglomerate, and it made me laugh so So speaking of this conglomerate, could you tell us how you balance your time and energy between creative work and managing your business?
Someone better tell me how to do that. I think I do have to divide it into different sections because I tried to bring all of the business energy to the creative, or even some of the celebrity fantasy energy to the creative, and it made me really anxious. And I found that when I'm writing, even trying to think about ideas, reading, drawing sketches, I kind of have to turn off the practical side of my brain and forget about all the tasks that it's going to take to carry things off, or all the possible risks about how people might respond, and just really tune in to maybe a creative side. So sometimes I'll wear different outfits to help me channel it. It's like I put on earrings if I want to be serious. I put on shoes when I need to talk to people. Although I forgot that today, so hopefully I'm doing okay.
I have on shoes, which is actually really good for me because, yeah, lacing up shoes. I have on Converse though, so can you really count them as shoes? So, so what's to come for Sasha Velour? You have a lot of. We saw that the book is coming in 2022. You have some more projects. New York is opening up, so we hope to see you around. What's to come in the last half of 2021, 2022? You want to share?
Yeah, so well, very, very soon, the Nightgowns cast and I, we came up with we wrote a musical together under quarantine, and we're debuting that at the end of the month, and it's going to be available online for people to see all over for just a small suggested donation. So anyone who wants to tune in and see a bunch of drag artists kind of tell our story through ridiculous lip syncing, and there's an alien invasion and some queer justice at the end. I think it'll be very cathartic. So we're working on that. I have a tour coming up in January 2022. And you mentioned my book, which is going to be a little bit about my life and mostly about my outrageous theories and discoveries about drag and how important it is to everyone's life. So stay tuned for that too, I guess.
No, that sounds amazing. We've come to the end of my questions. I do want to give you the floor, the space to give, I don't know, final remarks, any thoughts about Pride Month, what we should be thinking about. It's called El Mes de Orgullo here in Colombia in Spanish. But anything that you have to provide to our viewers today, and to those, anything, the floor is yours. You have all the time to kind of provide that.
Okay, let me try to distill all of my pride energy. I mean, first of all, I do wanna say to people that I do feel like one of the most important parts about this month, about all times, is to not feel alone, to know that you, wherever you are, whoever you are, you have a community that has your back, that extends internationally as well. And if we aren't doing a good enough job about keeping track of you, then let us know, call us out. We need to be answerable to each other, and we can be. And then I would also, then my, that's my word of support. And then my word of warning, I guess, is remember that your community doesn't look like you or sound like you or think like you. Your community is made of so many different types of people. No matter what kind of community, the queer community, your neighborhood, your your heart, everything, your identity. And so please stay open and listen and ask questions um, and change things up. Have fun with yourself, and that makes you more open to other people as well.
No, you couldn't have said it better, Sasha. That is amazing. Thank you so much for your time today and having this conversation with us. Shout out to Johnny as well and the whole House of Velour. This is a terrific way to commemorate Pride Month and to share your knowledge and your experience to our audience who you have lots of fans here, and we really, really hope when things get better that you are able to travel to Colombia and visit your fans and tell them hello. Thank you to the entire U.S. Embassy in Colombia. We hope that this was a great program for you, and we hope to see you again on our Facebook channels. Have a great day.